Hello, and welcome to St. Andrew. It is my privilege to welcome you to this sacred online space where we are all invited, included, and valued as vital and beloved members of our broader worshiping community. St. Andrew is proud to be an open, affirming, inclusive congregation that welcomes all people into the full life and communion of our church. This includes saints and sinners, believers and skeptics, the lost and the found, the wanderers and the wanderers, families of all shapes and sizes, and people from every point along life's journey. No matter who you are or where you've been, no matter what you believe or even if you believe anything at all, you are welcome here and you belong here. If you have any questions about our church, prayer requests for our care team, or if you would like to get in touch with a member of our pastoral team or staff, please email info@gostandrew.com. If you would like to explore deeper engagement with the St. Andrew community through our many classes, group life gatherings, and service opportunities, you can email us directly at connect@gostandrew.com. We'd love to hear from you. Lastly, to contribute a financial gift to the work and ministry of St. Andrew, you can always visit gostandrew.com/give or text St. Andrew to 28950. And now let's listen together to this week's scripture and sermon.
Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel." Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring word to me that I too may come to worship him." After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy, and going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way.
The Christmas feast is already a fading memory. Lent and Good Friday cannot be very far off. But for the time being, here we all are. In this classic poem, For the Time Being, W.H. Auden captured this time of year all too well. Here we all are, but Christmas isn't quite over yet. We are still traveling and likely putting Christmas away. Maybe before packing up the nativity set, you inched your magi closer to the Holy Family as we approach January 6th, or Epiphany, also known as Three Kings Day in many Latin American countries. January 5th is the 12th and the final day of Christmas. On January 6th, the Christian calendar turns to a new season. Now, the origins of Epiphany as a church festival are somewhat vague. as is the very definition of the word. Epiphany begins with the story of the Magi, 3 astrologers who follow a brilliant star to the place of Jesus' birth and honor the child with gifts. Upon seeing the baby, they were overwhelmed with joy and fell on their knees. Their arrival in Bethlehem is recounted in the gospel, traditionally attributed to Matthew. The word epiphany means both the revealing of God's presence and the sudden leap of understanding, a manifestation or discovery. The Magi's epiphany was all the above. Liturgically, the Christmas season ends with Epiphany, a day in which the early church celebrated Jesus' brilliant manifestation, not only to the Magi, but also to the world through his birth, baptism, and the first recorded miracle at the wedding at Cana. The story of the Magi has been retold in the poems of T.S. Eliot and W.H. Auden. The Magi have been main characters in operas and movies, including Monty Python's The Life of Brian. When the Magi arrived at Brian's home first, they took their gifts back when they realized they arrived at the wrong place. And even singer-songwriter James Taylor has a song in the Magi's honor, Home by Another Way. The Magi get little attention beyond a fanciful tale, but looking and listening closely, they offer more than a tagline to this Christmas story. Now, let's clear something up. The Bible doesn't say they were kings or that there were 3 of them. Because there were 3 gifts, people have guessed often that there were 3 Magi. And it is often assumed that because they brought gifts fit for a king, that they've actually been called kings. But really, who were they? Scholars tell us that originally in Persia, Magi were dream interpreters, astronomers, fortune tellers, or stargazers. Beyond that, not much is known except that they were people who tried to find meaning in the stars. The Magi are only mentioned in one place in the Bible, in Matthew. It should also be noted that when it was written within the law of Moses, God forbid the Jews to use the sun, moon, and stars for anything but giving light and telling the time of day and year. The penalty for breaking this law was death. The Jews would have never imagined that God would ever use the stars to send a message. But as it happened, Gentiles, foreigners, people who didn't even believe in their God, took to the road following a star to find their newborn king. As the story goes, the Magi first went to visit Herod in Jerusalem and to ask where the king of the Jews might be found. King Herod was confused and outraged because he proclaimed himself king of the Jews, even though he was a foreigner and only half Jewish. Herod was powerful and a heartless man who stole from the people, tortured whole villages, assassinated his opponents without hesitation, and held daily executions of anyone he feared was a threat to his power. That included his own wife, 3 sons, and his closest friends. After the questioning of the Magi, Herod consulted his scholars, who recounted that the prophet Micah wrote that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, the city of David. And so King Herod sent the Magi to Bethlehem with explicit instructions that if the Magi found anything resembling a royal baby, to come back and tell him. The Magi set out again, following the same star. This time the star guided them to the Christ child in Bethlehem and his parents. Overwhelmed with joy, the Magi kneeled and offered baby Jesus costly gifts, strange gifts for a child, but the tools of their trade. Upon their return, the Magi were troubled by a warning. They saw the deception of Herod and decided not to go back as he had commanded them. and instead went home by another way. In his rage, Herod was fit to be tied and ordered the murder of every male child 2 years old and under. For all of his enormous power, Herod knew that there was somebody in diapers more powerful still. Now, it is a legitimate question. If the Magi knew the star so well, why did they go to Jerusalem instead of Bethlehem first? Probably they made the kind of assumption that you and I would make too. Would you look for a king in a stable or in a palace? Common sense would say, go to the place of power. One of my favorite Christmas pageant stories involves something about common sense. My daughter, Ruby, has always had her own vocabulary, pretty much since she started speaking. She declared that they were crayons, not crayons, pretzels rather than pretzels, and would often yell, "Incredible!" at cars without tops driving down the interstate, rather than the all too basic description of a convertible. Her latest was a request for a thermos, or, in our words, a thermos that would keep things extra warm. While we found this to be endearing, we had her hearing checked at one point, which turned out just fine. From then on, we just embraced Ruby's gift of nomenclature. At Dumbarton United Methodist Church, our previous church home, there was a small but mighty team of kids who often played multiple roles in Christmas pageants. One particular year, I think Ruby was about 6, she was selected to be a wise person. I think really a wise person was the only option because she wouldn't take off the crown. For about 2 weeks, we worked with her on her lines in preparation for her Christmas Eve debut. Each time she practiced, she proudly stood in her fuzzy Elsa bathrobe and jeweled crown and said, "We come bringing gifts of gold, common sense, and fur." While she never wavered, no matter how often her brother corrected her, the congregation dissolved into laughter and the pageant got a standing ovation. I'll never hear the Christmas story without thinking of gold, common sense, and fur. Now, it is true that the Magi brought some common sense with them, along with their gold, frankincense, and myrrh, but their common sense, going to Jerusalem instead of Bethlehem, almost got Jesus killed. If we read between the lines of Matthew's story of the Magi, we can find another meaning, one that resonates and beckons us today. The Magi went home by another way. You see, the first Christians who followed Jesus weren't called Christians, but followers of the way. The Magi went home changed. They weren't the same people they were when they set out on the road to find Jesus. They became wiser. And although they found the Christ child, they hadn't really found what they were looking for. They found out that their assumptions were all wrong. They found the king on God's terms, not their own. It was there in Bethlehem that the Magi had their hearts and minds open. And there they dared to see and hear and trust the unimaginable and the unexpected. In doing so, they found another way home. Being people of the way means that we follow a call instead of the illusions of power and comfort. Biblical scholar Walter Brueggemann suggests that like the Magi, we too have a choice. We can take the road back to Jerusalem, yielding to earthly powers and principalities, or like the Magi, we can refuse to bend the knee to the Herods of our day and go home another way. We can go back to our old ways of doing things, back to the normal and predictable that will eventually destroy us, or we can choose to walk into the unknown with a hope that turns our expectations and our pretensions upside down. The way, or the walk of faith, often leaves us with ache and awe and unanswered questions. The Magi invite us to consider stepping out on an unknown journey while trusting the path and the one who accompanies us. My friends, this path may look very different from where we came and first started. Perhaps you too can relate to being in exile, unable to go home the way you came, strangers in a strange land. T.S. Eliot, in the poem The Journey of the Magi, describes what a journey it must have been for those who first followed the star, and asserts that the challenges did not cease for the Magi once they returned home. You see, it's like trying to unsee something. You can't really. Later this month, we will offer an all-church read of Brian McLaren's book, Do I Stay Christian? I hope in our read that we tuck away in our hearts and heads as we explore together our faith journeys, the story of the Magi, and that we see that there are Christian resources to help us imagine new and different ways of finding our way home and of being human beyond a prescribed faith. McLaren goes on to say in his book that our entire world needs radical rethinking, and that those of us who stay Christian have a phenomenal opportunity to bring the best resources of the Christian tradition to the side of those who are trying to create a new and better future. We have no control over people who will try to bend Christianity to preserve the evils of the status quo. But it's also true that no one can stop us from using the many resources of our tradition to bring the kind of change we need in our world. In the final chapter of his book, he ends with this: in the absence of ease and certainty, what amazing things can happen. Life can happen. Wonder can happen. Faith, hope, love, unspeakable joy can thrive in difficulty and uncertainty. A new humanity, humble, just, and kind can be born. Can you imagine? And so I find myself putting on the shoes, walking in the way of the Magi, imagining what compelled them to risk so much. And as I think of them, I find myself thinking of us as a congregation, a community of faith, wondering, what are we willing to risk and step into? What are we willing to leave behind that keeps us comfortable? Recently, I came across this reflection on Epiphany by church historian and author Diana Butler Bass. She reminded me that epiphanies surprise and disrupt the normal course of existence, and often come in unexpected ways from unexpected people and places. Epiphanies are not of our making, and in fact propel us into action. For the Magi, you see, weren't content at just gazing upon the star. They didn't remain in some distant locale and admire its glory from afar. They got up and they followed it to its source. Epiphanies do that. They grab hold of us, and we can't really shake them off. They ask something of us. So I'm curious what this looks like in your life when no other response was possible other than to keep walking, to keep following the path that God has set out before you. What made the Magi wise was their willingness to seek and search, and their openness to be transformed. They knew that if they wanted a new life, they would have to leave behind their old life. If they wanted to be transformed, they needed to let go of their past and risk a future with God in Christ. The invitation from Isaiah is extended to us all. Arise, shine, for your light has come. This invitation may come in the form of an unexpected opportunity, a new relationship, a chance for adventure, or even in a crisis or loss. Anything, really, that calls us from beyond ourselves to a new place or way of being. Or the invitation may come from within, rising up as an illumination from the depths of our being as we come into our own at last and shine the light on what is foundational to our faith or what is not. As ill-equipped as we might feel for whatever beckons us, we are not without resources when we begin our journeys of significance. The Magi had each other, the fellowship of the star. There is wisdom and guidance in community for all of us. I pray that St. Andrew can be a home, a place of belonging where we come to learn and pray and struggle together with what it means to be human, what it means to walk in the way in the light of Christ. Next week, Rev Mark will begin a sermon series on Why Christian, exploring the paradoxes and questions of the Christian faith. The Magi will accompany us on that journey too. There are reminders that being curious, questioning, and challenging norms and expectations, changing courses, are a part of being people of the way and not a lack of faith. So we begin, as did the Magi, whenever light beckons us, not knowing what the journey will mean when we consent to it. May we follow the light, though we do not know the way. We do not need to know everything to follow Christ, but to simply come as we are, to trust the invitation and the one extending it. The star in the Magi story that inspired them also shines on us and in us. Its light is generally not enough to illumine the entire path, but it is sufficient for us to take the next step. As we cross into the coming year, where do you find yourself on the path? And what gift might you offer to the world that only you can give? And where are the unfamiliar and even uncomfortable places where God is calling us as a community of faith? Echoing the words of Diana Butler Bass, Epiphany is a manifestation, the mystery revealed, and an invitation to discover grace, goodness, and God. It doesn't eliminate the darkness, but it beckons us to pay attention and participate in widening the circle of light in the world, to push back against injustice and brutality, and seek home by another way, which offers healing, liberation, and peace. It is far more than a day. It isn't just the weeks following Christmas or the Magi visit. This is the season of extraordinary time in the breaking through of creation's promise, a new humanity. Blessings and traveling mercies to you on this journey and in the year ahead. I look forward to walking with you. Happy Epiphany, friends. Takeaways for today include: being people of the way means that we follow a call instead of power and comfort. Home may look and feel different from where we started. And finally, home is a place where we are welcome as we are and transformed. Take good care and happy Epiphany.